All right, well, let's kick it off, everyone. This is the Media Gel podcast. I am your host, Guillermo Bravo. Today, we'll be covering 5 expert-proof tips to streamline dispensary operations with Eleanor Lynch and Ray Riley. Thank you both for joining us today.
Great to be here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. A little background on Media Gel. Media Gel is connects cannabis brands and retailers with consumers through our ad network of mainstream publishers, mobile apps, games, and TVs. A little background on our guest here. Eleanor Lynch is the COO of Chiaro. Is that pronounced correctly? Yeah.
Yep.
Chiaro is a publicly traded cannabis retail MSO headquartered in Vancouver, BC. We also have on the line today Ray Riley. He is the CEO of Progress Retail, a retail employee experience platform transforming the way store teams are trained, execute initiatives, and delight customers. Welcome to the show, Ray.
Thanks, Guillermo.
Yeah. Well, let's just start with a little bit about your background. Eleanor, we noticed that you have 8 years experience running retail at Lids and almost 4 years at Chiaro. How has the experience from outside the industry been influential in scaling operations within cannabis?
Okay. Well, I've been in the retail business for about 25 years, so a very long time. And my previous role was with Lids and the operations here in Canada. So I think it wasn't a lot of people that made the transition when I did. I transitioned in 2018, right before legalization in Canada, in preparation for legalization. And so I would say that for most of us that transitioned in the early days, there wasn't a lot of infrastructure. A lot of the things you're used to having, some of the great things from Progress Retail, for example, that you get exposed to over time, learning management platforms, point of sales. There was a lot of companies that weren't in the game yet for various reasons around regulations and legalization in other jurisdictions. So I'd say that's probably the biggest challenge if you're coming from outside the industry or used to a lot of service options. But things have certainly proliferated. They've changed a lot in the last 4 years.
Oh, I'm sure this industry always keeps us on our toes, and between compliance, innovation on technology, on products, like it's always changing. It's always changing. Ray, outside the industry, a lot of best practices can be applied to cannabis. What inspired you to adapt the platform to cannabis retailers, and what problems were you trying to solve?
Yeah, and I'll kick off with our mission, at Progress Retail, and that really revolves around the empowerment and enablement of frontline teams. So how can we make retail as easy as possible for those that really do matter the most, those on the front line? So we started focusing on cannabis, I'd say early 2020, recognizing that it was a retail category likely dealing with some of the same challenges as traditional retail. And so, getting back to that empowerment and enablement side of things, on the enablement side, I'd ask all of our listeners, for them to tally up all the different tools that their frontline teams engage with on a weekly basis. So, Eleanor mentioned some of those tools, right? You've got your point of sale, HR, payroll, scheduling. Sometimes that can be 3 tools in one, or 3 tools on their own. A tool for training, maybe a second tool for product knowledge, which I know we're going to talk about later. A tool for communications, tasks, and then there's email. It's just insane. So we expect teams to deliver, an exceptional customer experience and for store leaders to develop their teams. But, there's never going to be one app for all this stuff. But for us, we replace anywhere from 3 to 5 tools in one, really designed for retail. Now, on the empowerment side, there's a race to the bottom with some cannabis retailers as it relates to price. And so, that's not a winning strategy. And so in-store experience becomes a competitive advantage. And that's really where, on the empowerment side, our retail partners are able to leverage a really large library of retail education that differentiates on human connection, trust, and experience.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And, I know historically, like what was it like running communications and training before Progress Retail? For a dispensary retailer?
Yeah, I mean, this is a big one. And I'll sort of split the store communications from training because they're kind of 2 different initiatives.
Okay.
On the training side, it's usually a tale of two camps. And that really has a lot to do with where that organization's at in their life cycle. So, are you a 5-store chain getting off the ground, or are you reaching some degree of retail critical mass? So cannabis is still in its quite early innings, particularly in North America. So, the majority fall into that initial camp. So there could be little learning content design. There can sometimes be an ambiguous way of communicating standards and expectations. So I like to use the example of SOPs in like a Word doc format, right? That's great, but words don't teach. Yes, Kurt joined. What's up, Kurt?
Apologies, everyone. I looked at my calendar. It showed the wrong time on there. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm letting everybody down. So my sincere apologies.
No, Kurt, my apologies. I've been traveling here. I'm in Austin, Texas for South by Southwest, and my calendar was wrong. So, you can blame it on me on this one.
All good stuff.
Then just a little background on Kurt Isenberger. Is that correct?
Isenberger.
Isenberger. So Kurt Isenberger is the learning development manager and influential in retail operations at Loom. Loom is the largest vertically integrated single operator in the United States. Welcome to the show, Kurt.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to connecting, and I know Ray fairly well. It's always great to have a partner there, and to meet Eleanor and yourself also. So, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you as well. And Kurt, you have eight years of experience at Apple. How has that experience been instrumental in your leadership role at Loom?
Oh gosh, I'm thankful every day. I'll just start there. I think, as I reflect on my time spent with such a large organization at the scale they are globally, and I bring it back to kind of where we are current state as an organization. We've been scaling extremely fast. So with that, comes along with some key aspects of how do you deal with all that ambiguity, and how do you remain extremely agile and accomplish what you want to, all at the same time while growing so much throughout the states as well. So I pay homage to my skills that I've developed as a leader, and some of my operational prowess within retail as well, to really be able to influence and support and lead, let it be teams or individuals across Loom. So I'm extremely thankful, and for the past opportunities and kind of where it's led me to now.
Oh, that's quite impressive, and it's your experience is instrumental in what's needed in the cannabis industry, really to legitimize and scale these businesses. And what role does cannabis education play in the day-to-day operations, and what does your onboarding process look like at a retail shop?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's it's almost like, what role doesn't it play? Does it not play? Within retail, right? I think it's a huge segment. It's something that we're hyper focused on day to day. And, I know Ray and I have had this conversation many a time, and I continue to have it, let it be at the store level or with executives, that, there's the piece where we want to legitimize it, and, I think also still pay homage to the culture that's come from the past, while also at the same time, how do we create this space that's really open to everyone? So we've been extremely focused, obviously, from a product knowledge standpoint with the products that we carry, to essentially what cannabis is and what it can do. But then also, how does that come back to how we interact with customers and the consumers? Because we got those folks that have been embedded into culture for decades too. It's like, hey, I've never done this before. I'd like to give it a shot though, and and you guys look like and sound like a great starting point. So it's extremely important on the day to day.
Agreed. And Ray, how is turnover before and after implementing retail operations or retail employee experience platform, like Progress Retail?
Yeah, and I think getting back to those two themes of empowerment and enablement, we have a case study. We're running a new case study right now, but our retail partners in the first year of implementation were able to decrease their employee turnover between 28% and 79% in the first year of implementation. It's a real wide gap, of course, right? When we aggregated the data, not average, but aggregated, it came out at about a 61% reduction. So we're not a silver bullet. We like to say that, but this is really a combination of the right tools, the right learning, and of course, committed execution on the part of our retail partners. When teams, optimized teams deliver optimized outcomes, and that's just what it's about.
Agreed. And Eleanor, like, how do you streamline internal communication across multiple stores, regions, and states?
Well, it'd be provinces. I'm in Canada. So we are a multi-provincial retailer, fully federally legal in Canada.
Yeah.
And despite the legalization across the country, there is still definitely a stigma issue. I think, Kurt, you mentioned that, and I think that was a great point. The issue of stigma can't be underestimated when you're dealing in the cannabis space. And so making it a comfortable place for patrons, because most of our employees that work with us are team members. We call them cannabis consultants. They love the plant and they're super comfortable with the plant. And most of them use the plant. Some of them are close to the plant in other ways. And so they have to learn how to create that comfortable environment for somebody that's new to enjoying cannabis. And so what I love about tools like Progress Retail and working with Terry and Ray is certainly the ability to, as Ray said, optimize and bring people together on the journey and have them understand the different levels of where people are at and allow that to be consistent across the chain. Because that's the other issue we have across retail, is that as technology and tools have exploded, most executives have a little bit far from the experience of the associate. And for the associate, they've got like 5, 6, 7 tools. And oh, that's easy to manage. Well, maybe not if you only work 2 5-hour shifts a week. That's challenging to remember all that stuff and go to school or be a mom or be a dad or whatever it might be. And so what I love about trying to find ways to optimize onboarding, to optimize experience, is it really becomes about where the journey starts. And the journey starts between your customer that's external and your customer that's internal, which is your team member. So it's definitely very helpful to help bring those things together.
And how do you manage the execution of changes in policy at a company-wide level?
I think the same mechanisms. And this is what allows you really to make things simple. There are other tools that are in the ecosystem that are also helpful, but there's an expectation for immediate information digestion, and you got to be really careful about that, because that expectation leads to confusion, over information. I mean, that's a big problem in our world today, is like just too much information. People that sit in executive seats really need to think about, turning a ship as it gets bigger takes a lot more effort, and you have to be a lot more thoughtful. And as you're scaling your business, and maybe Kurt, this resonates for you, when you have just a few stores and you're starting, man, you can turn things on, turn things off, change policies. It's relatively simple. But then you get to scale, and maybe one day we've got a retailer sitting at 1,000 stores. Lids Sports Group was certainly at around the 1,000 store mark across several countries. That's a lot different. And so all of these tools help you on that journey of change that you go through.
And Kurt, anything that you'd like to add onto that as far as the journey and streamlining internal communications across all of your stores?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would definitely echo Eleanor's points, and I think for us and especially myself personally, you got to keep it simple too, right? There's like so much stuff that you could easily just get in front of your store teams, your bud tenders or luminaries, as we like to refer them to here at Loom, and it could just add a lot to their plate and also create a lot of confusion. And and I think sometimes even like mix up like certain priorities that you want to try to accomplish. Let it be at the retail space or like the individual level as well from that story. So I think it's extremely important. Like, how do you simplify the message that also still has the biggest impact for your team members as well? Now, in terms of like learning and development in the journey, it is just that, it's a journey. And we always like to say, like, it's something that's also not done alone. It's not a matter of like we have teams or bud tenders, whatever you call it, just sitting there. We give them like a bunch of manuals. Here you go, read through it, and it's like a silver bullet. And all of a sudden, like magic, you can do it at the best of your ability, right? So we like to emphasize like the partnership at the leadership level within our locations, along with the employees, and how does that partnership and that relationship really work in synergy with each other to help the development and strive and get the best for our teams, and obviously how that translates to our guest experience as well.
That's fantastic. It's fantastic. And as far as communications, Ray, like how do you communicate changes from HQ to each in store?
Yeah, well, I hung my retail ops hat up a handful of years ago, but I'm never saying never. I'd love to get back at it someday. So I can sort of give you some context as to how our retail partners do it.
Okay.
And I love what both Eleanor and Kurt just shared. I love what Eleanor shared around that empathy for that internal customer, that employee, that cannabis consultant or luminary in the context of today's talk. And then also Kurt around, streamlining it, keeping it simple and effective. So for us, when we're talking to retailers, we say, ask yourself before you send a store email, right? Because there's always, anyone in retail knows, Monday or Tuesday, those are big store email days. Before you do that, ask yourself 3 questions. 1, is it a task? Meaning, does this have contextual information, a due date, requirements, relevant recipients like the store manager, follow-up? Do they need to send photos or something? Then don't email that. Create a task. And obviously our platform enables that. Is this an update? So like a notice or some good news or praise, group communication, if you will. But we have an integrated communications tool to funnel that type of communication. But then last and definitely not least, is this a learning initiative? So do we need to lead teams through a concept or process, a way of working? We can then quiz or assess, whether they've absorbed what they need to know and what they need to do. So especially when we talk about regulatory stuff and compliance, right? That's really, really important. So let's make a quick course. And so, what we found is when retailers get in that habit and structure sort of these cadences of communications, the results are astonishing. Goes back to, optimized teams, optimized results.
Wonderful. And Eleanor, what, in your opinion, what is the most important thing about communications when it comes to managing a retail chain?
Gosh, I just really love the way Ray puts it. I think that's, we had, kismet when we first met, because that's exactly how I would say that is the best practice, and I don't know that in retail that is always the way we do things. And so it's great to have a partner that reminds you to, compartmentalize and to categorize what you're trying to accomplish and the stream that would best accomplish that. Because then it helps people think about what their outcome is, and then they deploy it in that manner. So if it's a learning initiative, you have to go slow and you have to make sure people understand it, but you also don't want to overcomplicate it and give too much information. So I can't really follow that answer with Ray's answer with anything more, because I think he hit the nail on the head. Definitely categorize and be clear and consistent in your communication.
We have a question from the audience here. What is the average annualized cost of training for retail businesses? What percentage of the total cost should be technology tools?
That is a very good question. I don't know if I should tackle that one as the
anyone.
No, I'm teasing.
Anyone, feel free.
It's funny. We once, I don't have the data anymore. About 3 years ago, I think we sort of started to look at this. We started to take our retail partners at the time, their annualized revenue, and we obviously looked at their investment and came up with it was a fraction of 1%, in terms of investment. Now, the question becomes, though, what are you getting, right? And I think that this is, something that we, particularly prior to meeting with the retailer, we struggle to articulate, is the value that we provide. It's not just a tool. You also are getting access to this renowned library of education. And so, you take L&D, right, as a department. And I know, it's great we have Kurt here, who's really, spearheading that for Loom, alongside, Dan and a lot of the other folks there. L&D, there's a great infographic where there's actually 22 roles that sit within L&D. So what retailer can afford 22 salaries? Not many. And of course, there's some jack of all trades, like Kurt out there and that. But even still, where do you need to partner? And where can you focus on your core competency as a retailer or a cannabis retailer to be able to drive the most amount of value? So it's a difficult question to answer. There are a lot of variables, but of course, we've got 2 partners on the call that their insights would be more insightful than mine.
Yeah, I'll share this. For someone that's been with Loom now for a little over a year, and if you think about it, if you're like a retail organization just getting started, the one bit of advice, what I would say is, take advantage, put yourself out there and see what's out there to use, right? And there's something to be said, like the face-to-face value for like a small startup and an entrepreneur that has like their single store operation where, they're side by side with their team and having that interaction, that relationship. But then as you scale and grow, you definitely need to look at some resources or organizations that can be great partners to help you, broaden your influence and your impact when it comes to T&D. In terms of like monetary value, gosh, it's a hard question to answer, kind of what Ray was speaking to. But I think the one thing you have to be thoughtful about is like, what makes sense for you and your brand, as it relates to what you're trying to accomplish, and I'd say like listen to those closest to the action as well. Like, how do you solicit feedback from your teams and your leaders around, what they need and what their wants and desires? And in many cases, it can kind of steer you on the correct path of the desired path that the organization would want to go.
And Kurt, you brought up a good point there as far as feedback. How does Progress Retail take feedback, from employees, from management, and then put that into, implement that within the system and improve on their operations?
Yeah, absolutely. I think at face value with what we're trying to accomplish, it gives the immediate feedback in terms of like scale learning opportunities at the store level and of course at the district level in terms of like accomplishment and being able to I guess gather the data, so to speak, and see how teams are able to absorb the data and learning, right? You've got different ways you can kind of like measure that from that standpoint. And I think on the other side of it too, we use Progress Retail and the content that's provided to also ask some great questions when I'm in stores, asking about their learning journey and just like some opportunities or some successes they're seeing at the store level. What can we do maybe a little bit differently as well when it comes to enhancing their environment and their abilities to create a great experience for guests, and how Progress Retail, Ray and I have these conversations at times. I'll just shoot like a random email because a random thought will be like, yeah, we thought about this before. I've heard this from a couple of our team, and, we'll banter back and forth. And in many instances, it can lead to like some really good aha moments of like, hey, maybe there's something to this, or maybe if we think about it a different way, we can still get the same bang for a buck and add value and really provide what our teams are looking for.
That's phenomenal, and kudos to Ray and the team for building on such a valuable resource of this library of education of retail tools, and Kurt and Eleanor for implementing these and putting them into action with 5, 10, 20 locations. It's quite impressive. As far as the SOP, go ahead.
I just throw something in there. Of course, I'm a promoter of like Progress Retail and their brand and what they do, and I'll just say they're just getting started. With what they have available already and like some things in the pipeline. And I think about like, what's on the horizon for Loom and what we want to try to accomplish, and ideally some things that probably resonate with others in the cannabis industry. It's pretty fantastic. And it's obviously about cannabis, but I think at the end of the day, when we think about it, it's more so about people, right? It's about our teams and also our customers and our guests, as well at the end of the day.
Agreed. Great job over there, Ray.
Oh, well, thanks. But I can't stress this enough. We're retailers. Like, we're not technologists. We're retailers at heart, and it takes. We are in our early innings, but we would be nowhere if it wasn't for, I will use the term not lightly, visionary operators like Eleanor and the Chiaro team and Kurt and the Loom team that want to go about cannabis employee experience in a new way, right? There's a lot of old tools out there. There's a lot of old ways of doing things, and they both and their teams get that, it is 2022 and there is probably a new way to do things as opposed to how retail was ran in 2005, and so I can take very little credit because without them, we would not be able to continue to invest and grow this product. So I'm very appreciative.
So you mentioned, how retail was done in the past, how it's done currently. Crystal ball, like what do you see 2050? How's retail going to be? How's that experience going to be different?
Well, yeah, I mean, 2050, I mean, gosh, I think, the trend right with retail is it's splitting in two. The term that's been thrown around is bifurcating, right? So you've got, your high touch experience, your low touch experience. I don't know. Kurt and Eleanor could speak much more eloquently about probably, what the cannabis side of that. Like, obviously, I think there's going to be, probably drones delivering, your pre-rolls and edibles probably by 2050, but who knows? There's the old saying, we wanted flying cars, and instead we got, I forget how that quote goes. So yeah, I think that, look, I think there is always going to be a degree of retail that is going to be high touch and require incredibly talented and skilled individuals in those stores. They're going to have to be highly empowered and enabled. And that's obviously what we are at Progress Retail betting our futures on, that's going to be the case. So yeah, that would probably be my answer.
Nice.
I love the question. I think it's a great question. I get asked the question a lot. I'm sure Kurt does, as well as Ray. And no one has a crystal ball. So I'll say something bold, which may or may not be true. It's just certainly my perspective, my experience from being in retail for so long. I think you're going to see a lot of big retailers very disrupted, because retail is now the center of the experience. Is if you're going to do brick and mortar, certainly there's still a place for brick and mortar. I mean, I find it funny when people are like, "Oh, brick and mortar is going to go away." It's never going to go away. It's always going to be there. But it's, man, you're going to get disrupted, because you got a lot. If you're a big company and the center of the experience is community, and we have all of these tools now that allow us to connect with our communities in different and more meaningful ways. Really, what do you have to pay attention to? You have to pay attention to the experience of those that deliver the experience. And I think that when you are running in a world that was maybe less complicated, where there was less chance to disrupt your business, it was very hard to get into your space. I don't know that's the case anymore. I think it's really easy to be disruptive in the space with all of these tools. There you go. That's one of them. And so, man, you better really be thinking about how do you connect in communities and make meaningful moments.
Yeah, I agree with Eleanor wholeheartedly. And I think, in terms of like, how do you predict the future, or like what's on the horizon or around that corner, the longer you try, the further out you try to look out, it's almost like, looking down the road at night, it's, the vision becomes a little bit more blurred, right? Just because so much can change. If I look a little bit more shorter term, I will say a couple of things that come to my mind. I think, our culture and our I guess the consumer in itself kind of can set the standard to a certain extent also as well. As things evolve, you're holding up your smartphone there. We know what that did to us as a world, and when you kind of like tie those things and start connecting the dots, it can go in a lot of different directions. I think for me, when you think about at the heart of like retail and cannabis retail, these centers or these dispensaries are really at the forefront of really how everyone within the communities can kind of come together, experience this product firsthand and first out, and there's something to be said by, like, depending on the type of industry you're in, like digital retailers might have more of a distinct advantage, but when it comes back to people, we're all social creatures, and like we like to come together, and especially around cannabis as well. So I think as we look towards the future, I don't necessarily think that's going to be going away really at all, if in the short term anyway, or if ever. I think the thing we want to think about is, especially for like states of Michigan that I'm in, we're still in its infancy, so things are going to continually rapidly change, and I think we need to, as much as possible, stay ahead, be innovative, be relentless, have that grit, and sometimes, when we think of like, we don't know if this is going to work, and trying something new, try it. The worst case thing that can happen is maybe it doesn't work in the moment, but it can also be like a learning opportunity to lead to some discoveries that you never thought you could have before as well.
Yeah, it's really setting yourself, apart from the competition, right? Really being that an innovator, and better than anyone, right? Working at Apple, it's a company known for its innovation and really setting the tone, and really dominating the global market. So transitioning a little bit to.
I'm curious, Ray and Kurt, do you think we're going to be shopping in the metaverse in the next?
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
I'm a social.
I will say this. I think with like companies like Facebook and the work that we're doing around there, I think it's a great start. I think the tricky thing for that kind of like technology is it can catapult very quickly, or it can have like a very long road. When it comes to cannabis in our industry, there's probably certain things that you'll be able to experience that folks will probably want to, especially when it's new, shiny and bright, right? But when you think about, I don't know, when I personally think about like cannabis and like, what really attracts or gets folks excited about it, it's the intimacy of it as well. And, someday maybe we'll be able to fill that gap in the metaverse or with these certain technologies to be able to overcome that. But, in this day and age, there's, when you see someone coming in and, and taking that flower and smelling it and a smile getting on their face and like sharing personal stories around, how it helps and enhance their life, or even, their go-to socially to connect with their friends, it's hard to beat. It's hard to beat. And if we get over that hill, it's going to be an exciting thing. I don't know if it's going to be anytime soon. Like I dabble a little bit in like the VR stuff, like just, on occasion. And, I'm a little bit of a snob when it comes to that, just because I just like, this is kind of too blocky. It reminds me of like Nintendo, like the Nintendo version of tech, even though it's at its beginning. Versus something like that. But I would probably personally gather more towards augmented reality first before virtual reality. If anything, where they can kind of like come together with potentially within our retail spaces, future state.
Yeah, that's really well said. I think we're Tech Chiaro here in Canada with 17 locations, e-commerce, omni-channel, reserve online, pick up in store, delivery. That's last mile. We're big on integrating tech and improving the experience in terms of how you get the experience you want. But I'm super curious about how others like Kurt and Ray see, the real forward thinking changes that are coming, because, the landscape has already changed so rapidly. That's great feedback, Kurt. Thank you for sharing that.
I think it's a great question, Eleanor. And I also, it's interesting to see how, technologies are always used before they're fully understood. And you look at the example of Walmart that put out that video a month or two ago of shopping at Walmart in the metaverse. And that's like a very linear way of thinking around this. And I don't think that that's probably going to be a very large use case for the metaverse. But when I think about retail and luxury retail and even cannabis, I think we all saw the Mike Tyson ear edibles that came out the other day. And I think about that and I say, all right, well, is there some metaverse application, like something similar potentially to an NFT, where you have a Mike Tyson autographed Evander Holyfield ear gummy, right? Like, is that then a store of value? Maybe. I'm 32, so like I'm just past like the generation that's really gaming a lot and collecting all these things in these digital worlds. It wasn't really what I grew up with. I'm not knocking it because I just don't personally fully understand it. But I definitely think there's a large segment of folks that are largely operating in these spaces. And I think that true human connection and experience, though, in person is going to, I think, especially with what people have gone through in the last 2 years with COVID, I think going to really explode over these next few years. So how that impacts the metaverse, I'm not sure, but it's definitely something I think is really, really fascinating to see the excitement around.
And I am here at South by Southwest, and I did attend a panel with Faith Popcorn on 2050 and 5 predictions for 2050. And she was sharing that when it comes in the metaverse and what you expressed, Kurt, as far as the limitations, as far as smelling, tasting, that in the near future, you will be able to taste, smell, and feel from the metaverse. So when that changes, then how is that going to impact our experience in these different applications? And just another example that was given is, we can go back in the metaverse and go back to prohibition times and see how it was to live in the 1920s and go through history and experience that, in person, in first person, immersed in that whole experience, as opposed to just reading about it in the book. So that those type of kind of immersive, I don't even know what you call them, but just different meta.
Yeah, kind of like those experiences. Yeah.
Experiences will make an impact on us, and be able to see, go to a farm, go to one of your producer processors farm, go to Kiara, go to your, allow someone in a retail store to go to the actual farm and grab a plant and get a tour of, the HQ or anything that you like to. So it's just really connecting that experience in store to, as you said, omni-channel across all platforms. I think, Kurt, as far as SOPs, like what's the process of creating, how SOPs, how do you manage, how do you implement these across the company?
Oh yeah, gosh, that's a great question. It definitely looks a little bit different now than I'd say even a year ago when we were only at 13 retail locations. To a certain extent, I feel what you kind of have to do, especially starting out, is create what's referred to as these like little hot teams, right? Especially if you're an up and coming retailer, and you want to standardize some best practices to create alignment operationally across your locations. So we've tapped like folks from like that work directly in the retail in terms of leadership, and sometimes we'll have these cross-functional teams and have someone on like our ops excellence team kind of partner with that from that standpoint to come together. Because the one thing that we've uncovered, since I've been in this industry and then at Loom and actually others, is, we need to hear the voice of those closest to the action, and value their opinions and ideas. Far be it for me as like the T&D like leader for Loom is just sit behind the desk and like have these grandiose ideas and just like, all right, here's what we're going to implement, send, right? So I think that's going to be extremely critical from creating like standard operating procedures on how you get things done. But I think also, so there's that piece of those teams. And I think the other piece too is you got to really think about, at times you can have competing priorities as an organization as well, which I'm sure, Eleanor especially is probably familiar with, like what's most important, how you prioritize that, and really having those teams come together from a SOP standpoint, really drive those conversations, and accomplish what needs to be accomplished that's going to have the biggest impact across like most entities, and kind of go from there. So I'd say, think big. You got to funnel down though, and and have laser focus, but also bring the right people along with you as well, versus maybe sometimes the one or two folks that you would want only to make the only decisions.
Wonderful. And we have a question from the audience here. What are some of the best training libraries we can subscribe to? Do these touch into the cannabis training or soft skill training?
I'll say, well, Progress Retail first and foremost, in terms of some the cannabis care. And actually, the great thing that I love about that platform also is it's the cannabis education, and there's some other things coming. But then also, there's training in there for bud tenders around some of those. People say soft skills. I refer to them as hard skills because sometimes interacting with people can be challenging, because everyone's different. So they've done a really nice job of teeing up focusing on some specific skills when it comes to connecting with people and really how to create a great experience. And I think also there's the third piece too with like leadership development also is extremely important. Our team members at our store locations heavily rely on great leadership to guide and support, along the way. So Progress Retail, of course, I'm a little bit biased as well. For our organization, there's been, and forgive me if I butcher this, the Gangier program that's been floating around a lot. We got a couple of our managers in our organization that have gone through it. It's almost like the sommelier kind of certification course. I've heard nothing but good things as of yet anyway about that. But then also, if you're wanting to also develop other skills outside of cannabis that you can like segue into and help you just as an operator, as a retailer. Gosh, there's a lot of great stuff out there from like leadership philosophies for leaders. LinkedIn Learning has always been a good platform. Even my leader also always promotes that stuff, and he has like good takeaways from that standpoint as well. I'm a fan of podcasts, and so on and so forth. A recent book that I read recently that I'd share is the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. It's something that came back from the 90s as well, but it kind of still holds up true. Fundamentally anyway. I'm a big fan of that, but yeah, I'd say that like I can't pinpoint one for Loom in itself. We have Progress Retail that we heavily utilize, and then based off some of the connections we make either with leaders throughout Loom and soliciting feedback from leaders at the store level, they usually are very very forefront with sharing ideas around some opportunities for development and stuff too.
All right, and then continuing on, Kurt, as the learning development head, like what's something you want retailers to know about L&D?
That it is a journey is probably my biggest thing. It's never ending. It's nonstop. And when you think about our industry in itself, it's ever evolving, right? It's growing, at substantial rates. So you really want to create a culture within your stores that's part of the journey day to day. Obviously, you got the other components in terms of like taking care of guests, selling products, educating consumers around certain products or just cannabis in general. But even before you get to there, you've got to start with your own team, your internal customers as well, right? And really set them up for success. So I would say my advice would be like, how do you incorporate and integrate learning opportunities? Even on the day-to-day, they don't have to be a grandiose. So like, there's 3 hours of training everyone needs to go through around X, Y, or Z. It could be moments in time, that your retail leaders can really make these connections and add value that then goes to their team and then translates to the guests also.
Wonderful. Ray, leaning on your expertise, what should cannabis retailers be considering when it comes to a learning strategy, for their teams and organizations?
Yeah, and I would definitely love to, include Eleanor in this as well, because we've been with, Chiaro for now coming up on a year, and they've done such, an amazing job of implementation. Kurt and the Loom team, we've been together now since about roughly October, November, I think. So a little bit earlier on, but I think to make it really, really, really simple, what do you have in terms of learning now? And it's sort of like that how to eat an elephant one bite at a time kind of thing. I think a lot of retailers, it's a very daunting task to design an entire like learning path for your teams. So how are your teams currently onboarded and inducted? Is it a 50-page PowerPoint deck that takes hours for a store manager or another stakeholder to take a new hire through? Okay, how do you measure that? How do you track that? What's it costing you in terms of execution gaps, et cetera, right? So, we support our retail partners in developing that. But I think, secondly, what do you need, right? So is it really doubling down on experience and those skills that, we really pride ourselves on in terms of empathy, communication skills, being able to be a really advanced listener. That's the what do you need? And then what do you need to partner on? And I think that's, for a retailer of any size, really the question to ask. Now that's all the what, right? The what of it, but the how, I mean, not to put you on the spot, Eleanor, but I'd love to involve you in this more. Like, you guys have done such an amazing job, like in the how. And, obviously Aaron and now Sonia have been so instrumental in that as well at the district level. But, would love your take, on sort of the rubber hitting the road. You can buy something, right? But then how does it actually, how does it work?
Yeah, no, that's great. I love the way you broke that down. I think it starts, and I think Kurt, you probably agree with this. I think it starts with vision. You have to have somebody that houses the vision of what is important and why it's important. And if the why is really at the forefront of the what, then it makes the how super easy, because every time you empower, and I think empowerment is huge. I had the vision that I really, from my experience of watching others do it poorly, I was super passionate about how people learn. And my son has a learning disorder, a visual processing disorder. He's dealt with his whole life. And so I really became very intimately aware of how people learn differently, people take in information differently. And I really started to apply that in my role in retail and operations. And he's now almost 18. So I've been doing that a long time, of thinking about, how people learn and what they learn. But I think if the why is there, the vision of your associates at the front of it and their experience and how they connect with the meaning behind the brand and what we're there to do. Chiaro comes from the word chiaroscuro, which means from the darkness to the light. That's really easy to say. It's another thing to embed it into everything you do. And with Aaron and Sonia, our district sales managers, who are amazing, they have been empowered to bring that notion of light and how we educate people. And that includes both our internal customer and external customer. So it's a great question. I think it starts with vision and making sure everyone knows the why.
Exactly. We have a question from the audience. It's probably good for you, Kurt. I have a new pot shop. Do I hire an L&D person or promote up?
Oh gosh. My first knee-jerk reaction is, I think for most organizations, if not all, there's something to be said about like opportunities to like grow your team internally, right? And give that. And I think, but you also have to be very thoughtful around, what's going to be served best for your team at large, and then also, the communities you're going to serve, right? I hear often, like even now, it's like, I'd love to be part of the training team, et cetera, et cetera. So if those opportunities are there, like, how do we help them develop the appropriate skills to be successful in a role, versus sometimes like, oh yeah, we're going so fast, I got to just put somebody there. And then sometimes it doesn't really set one up for success, and let them really flourish in that. So, it's not I guess a black and white answer. You should do internal or hire externally. You got to really assess the needs of what you have and, what you really need current state. And if there's someone that shows the ambition, has I'd say the learning agility and the positivity, and, can represent the brand very well, and they're up for the challenge, like, hey, for me, those are all great things that I kind of look for, and also really think about, when presented with that. But also at the same time too, if maybe now is not the right time and you have to look at external resources, that's an okay thing as well. For us, all of us, I would say it's usually like a gut check, right, for us to look inside and like, all right, so where are we at and where do we need to be? So there's not a one-sided answer, unfortunately. It's really about the people and knowing your people and the capability and kind of like, where they can flourish and kind of help that guide the decision or the thought process. I'm always a huge advocate for promoting internally.
Yeah, agree. As far as operational operations, from your experience, team here, what operational processes have been the most challenging as a whole?
That's a really broad question, but operational challenges probably always revolve around question actually that was asked, which is succession planning. That's the number one most important thing you can invest in if you're a small business owner and you're listening to this. Invest in building your bench, because once you get that process down, everything is so easy because you got everyone involved, everyone's invested. You have people that are super bought into the vision and to the experience, and they become an investment. They have put the time. The equity is often one thing people think about in terms of capital, but there's equity of my time and my skill set. And you have a lot of young people out there that are starting in your stores and they're starting at the bottom level. Invest, because they could be the best amount of equity you build in your business for them putting their equity of time and passion. So if you can get that right, you can get a lot of other things right.
Love that. Kurt, did you want to go? Or I was going to add something to Eleanor's, but I'd love you to.
Go ahead.
No, I love what Eleanor said. And I think something that can't be discounted here with cannabis as a retail category is that there are operators that have no retail experience, and that's okay. But that is going to put the employee experience of frontline retail team members at a disadvantage. And so I think, like, as you know, if I was running, a cannabis business, and this is why I love, obviously Loom and Chiaro so much, is that they are a team of retailers that obviously, that's a prerequisite in my book in terms of, being able to hire, being able to train, being able to develop, being able to create opportunities. I mean, that's so, so important. And, cannabis, for a lot of reasons, that we've got a lot of attorneys, we've got a lot of bankers, and that's all good and fine. But if you don't organize the right talent on the retail side, your stores are going to be just at a disadvantage. And so, for us, obviously coming back to how we support retailers in decreasing employee turnover, that's how you have those succession opportunities. The longer your teams are in the role, the more optimized they are. Before I turn it over to Kurt, I always, when we do talk to, and I've had this conversation with Eleanor, when we talk to like a CFO or something, and they go, what's the ROI of this? And early days, I'd be very kind. Now I'm sort of coming into my own, but I would say, okay, I said, well, what's the ROI of your mother? What's the ROI of having good parents? What's the ROI if you're Susie, the bud tender, and she knows her schedule for the next 3 weeks because her manager's trained, can manage time, and is effective as a manager and leader? You can't run your business off a spreadsheet. And that's, I think, where retail has struggled, but also I think where cannabis retail is in some ways a bit more prone to thinking due to, where some of these businesses are originating, out of large capital groups and what have you. So I think, like, I forget who it was, but we've all been saying it, retail's people. And, it's about really putting people at the front and center of the operation. So.
Well said, Ray.
Yeah, and I would definitely echo all those sentiments, and to kind of go off of like Eleanor as well. Like, I definitely agree. You got to have a strong, healthy bench of very talented, passionate folks. They're really the foundation of every strong and successful business, right? I think the other piece too is, and many times let it be like you're at the very beginning, or you're looking to grow, or potentially you're in the middle of growing rapidly. We have this conversation like with different departments. On occasion is like, what's the next thing that we need to do to grow our business? And I use that term loosely, right? Not in the sense of maybe just like additional stores, but it could be like making proper investments around training development, or changing over systems from point of sales, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, with sometimes when you have competing priorities, folks need to kind of take a step back and look at, what makes sense now, right? Do I need to raise capital so I can go and we can continue to grow more retail spaces potentially, or is it, we need to double down on our people focus internally, because that's actually going to be the precursor to some of these other elements as we look at the next fiscal year. So I think we have to be thoughtful sometimes around that, because at the end of the day, like, this industry is moving so quickly, we can get caught up in all the noise that comes along with it, to where, and don't get me wrong, we do it unintentionally, make rash decisions. So my advice though would be is like, definitely take the time to, have conversations with your peer group, your leaders, if you have other partners out there as well. When you think about like learning and development, such as Ray and our partnership, and others also, because we help each other out. Let it be directly or indirectly, to help kind of like steer. Like, there's a phrase that I heard long ago, sometimes around like, the ship sometimes might be heading in the right direction, but also is it taking on water, so slowly sinking, so to speak. So the metaphor being that, we want to make sure that we have our eyes open to what's going on around us and stay focused, but also clear out the noise as well at the same time.
Thank you for that, Kurt, and thank you, Eleanor, Ray, and Kurt for joining us today and sharing your insights with our audience. Thank you, everyone, for logging on today on Zoom and across LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and beyond. I did share the LinkedIn accounts for all of our panelists here, so if you'd like to reach out, but team here, if you'd like to share your personal handles, or how can people reach you online, this is your chance.
Thank you very much for having me. And if you want to reach out, definitely check me out on LinkedIn. And you can always, if you're in Canada, check us out at chiaro.com.
Yeah, same here, everyone. Again, I'll profusely apologize for my tardiness, but thank you so much for being so gracious. It was fantastic to connect with everyone on the panel today. Yeah, again, LinkedIn, similar to Eleanor, loom.com as well, Michigan-made cannabis company. Even I'll give you my work email too. It's kurt.isenberger@loom.com if you'd like to reach out on that platform also. So thank you again so much, everyone.
Thank you, Kurt.
Yeah, great. So Ray Riley on LinkedIn, got everything else to Twitter. The company has all that good stuff too, progressretail.com. Thanks so much, Guillermo. Appreciate it. And thank you to Kurt and Eleanor for slicing out an hour of your day to join me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. We'll have a wonderful week. Happy St. Patty's Day, and we'll be in touch soon. Cheers.
Take care, everyone.